You're listening to an Ono Media podcast.
Good morning, and thanks for joining me for Rise in Crime, your morning caffeine hit all about crime. I'm Mama Jules, and a Florida man who was found guilty of strangling 2 women was sentenced on Tuesday. 30-year-old Wade Wilson absolutely didn't get the fairest of beginnings in this life. His teen parents weren't ready to raise a baby. Stephen, that's his father, well, he told jurors that when he found out he was going to be a father at age 15, he simply couldn't take on the task. That led to Wade being adopted by church friends of his mother's parents. He was raised in the Tallahassee area, and that was the end of the communication for Stephen with Wade until Wade turned 18. And then Wade reached out. And according to Stephen, it was mostly for money. He would need help from time to time, and since they lived in different cities, they really couldn't get together much. And that reaching out from time to time, well, it continued until that different kind of phone call that Stephen received in October of 2019. This time, Wade wasn't just asking for money. He was confessing, but not with remorse. According to Stephen, he was confessing with pride, proud of murdering 2 women. And Wade had such a sketchy history of storytelling with his father that Stephen thought during that first call, he really didn't believe him. It was too outlandish, the things he was telling him. Then even during the second call from his son, Stephen thought there was no way this could be true. It was during the third call when Stephen just knew in his gut that Wade wasn't fibbing this time. So what happened on that October 2019 day that led to Wade confessing to his father? Well, it's a story. Let's get into it. Wade and his girlfriend, Melissa Montanez, were at a bar called Boot Alive. That's in Cape Coral. During that evening, Wade kept pressuring Melissa to leave the bar and head to Jason's home. Okay, that's a friend of Wade's. And Melissa didn't even know Jason. And the whole situation was just making her uncomfortable. So Melissa just peaced out. She said, "See ya," and she left Wade and her car at the bar. That's when Wade met 35-year-old Christine Melton, who was bartending that night. And I should tell you, Wade didn't look like Wade looked at his trial. 2019 Wade had 0 face tattoos. He had thick, dark hair cut neatly. He's tall, like 6'6". And when he met Christine at the bar, he said his name was JR. Well, Christine's friend Stephanie even testified that there were no immediate red flags about Wade. He just seemed like a good guy. Well, the night progressed and Christine allowed Wade/JR to come back to her place after the two had already been quite cozy with each other. Wade attempted to drive Christine and Stephanie in his girlfriend's car, but the drive was a struggle because the car was a stick shift and Wade doesn't know how to drive a stick shift. Once they arrived at Christine's home, Stephanie hugged and kissed Christine goodbye so she could get to her kids to take them to school that morning. Well, at this point, after a night of partying and drinking, Christine is just exhausted and she falls asleep. I'm sure believing that Wade is going to do the exact same thing at her place. But maybe the temptation was too much for Wade because he bragged to his father in that phone call that after Christine was asleep, he climbed on top of her and choked her. When he explained to his father what he had done, he called Christine a filthy name. And evidence found during her autopsy showed that Christine fought her attacker. She had broken nails, bruises both inside and outside of her body, and swelling on her brain because Wade had to repeatedly strangle and subdue her in order to finally kill her. After murdering Christine, Wade hung out at her place for a bit. And of course, what does he do next? He calls his girlfriend more than once, begging her to come pick him up. But Melissa's still a little spicy about the night before and the car issue that she encountered with him, so she refuses to come get him. Well, this left Wade facing his actions. Christine is lying there, lifeless. So finally, he rolls Christine's dead body into a rug and attempts to stuff her body into the trunk of Christine's Nissan Versa. But by this time, the body had become too stiff and immovable. All of his plans just aren't working out for him. He can't hide Christine's body. He can't get his girlfriend to come get him. So he just left Christine at the house and got out of there in Christine's Nissan. Now he heads to his girlfriend's place of employment, and Melissa, his girlfriend, is now super confused. Here's Wade in someone's car, and he's acting frantic. He tries to pull Melissa into the Nissan, gripping so firmly he rips her dress. Now during the scuffle, the car rolls forward and bumps into another car. Wade is really mad now. He punches Melissa, slaps her several times, and tries to choke her. People at Melissa's work have called the cops, and Melissa's just trying to save herself. And eventually, Wade drags Melissa up a flight of stairs and holds her against a wall by her throat. After hitting her one more time, Melissa freed herself and ran. And Wade does the same thing. He flees in the Nissan Versa. Now, while driving, he encounters a second woman, 43-year-old Diane Ruiz. And Diane was just walking down the street, headed to complete her shift at the Moose Lodge where she worked. Well, Wade pulls over and asks Diane for directions. After conversing and asking how to get to a Cape Coral school, he opens the passenger door, and it seems like Diane gets into the car. We don't really know how she entered the car, if Wade pulled her in or if she voluntarily got in, but she ends up in the car. And right there, on the street, Wade strangles another woman. He drives Diane to a field behind a Sam's Club, and when he dumps her body, he realizes she is not dead. So he gets back in the stolen vehicle and repeatedly runs over Diane. In the confession to his father, he said he was assuring Diane's death by, quote, making her look like spaghetti. Now, testimony in the trial indicated Wade ran over Diane up to 20 times with the stolen car. In a culmination of his criminal activities, after killing the two women, Wade broke into the home of an elderly couple, Fanny and Kent Amlin. And the gods were smiling on the Amlins, thank goodness. They had just left for some cooler temperatures in Ohio when Wade broke into their home. And he made himself welcome. He was drinking White Claws, taking off his clothes, and generally just messing up the place. Okay, so remember the 3 phone calls to his father. Well, during the 3rd call, Stephen put Wade on speakerphone so that Wade's biological mother could listen in. His mother then called law enforcement and relayed what she had just learned from her son. Wade's father, Stephen, said he knew he couldn't help his son. He told jurors he just kept thinking, what if those women were my mother? Stephen then hatched a plan. He asked Wade for his address to the Amlins' home, all under the guise that he was going to send an Uber to Wade's location to pick him up. Well, after Wade's mother relayed the address of the Amlins, where Wade had broken into, police descended and arrested Wade. Eventually, after lots of maneuvering and playing around and everything, they charged him with 2 counts of first-degree murder, grand theft of a motor vehicle, battery, burglary of a dwelling, and first-degree petty theft. Now, since his arrest, Wade has been incarcerated in the Lee County Jail. And during that time, he took arts and crafts time to a whole different level. The man who entered the jail now had multiple face tattoos that included a swastika, several words, stitching around his mouth and into his jaw, and shading to one entire side of his face. Now, the tattoos became an issue right before his trial because he requested that he be able to cover them up with facial makeup. Well, that request was agreed upon, but the attempt to cover those tattoos didn't work. The jurors could still see the ink through the makeup. He also had some additional charges filed against him while incarcerated and awaiting trial for the capital murder of the 2 women. In April of 2020, so that was just 7 months after the murders, Wade was implicated in a narcotics scheme running through the jail. 2 jail employees and Wade were moving drugs through the jail by hiding them in Ziploc bags and placing them in flower beds. And then in October of 2020, about a year after the murders, Wade and another inmate attempted to escape the jail, but he was stopped quickly before he could even flee. The 2 men had shattered a window and tampered with the window frame in order to escape the jail. And even more occurred while he was awaiting trial. At one point, a friend of Wade's, named Tristan, asked Wade in a letter to contact Wade's crew on the outside to set up the killing of Tristan's baby mama. Okay, I didn't even follow that. I'm sure you didn't follow that. Okay, Tristan, the friend, He had domestic abuse charges filed against him by the mother of his child. And so he sought out help from Wade to find the right people to kill the woman or the mother of his child. Now, in the letter that he sent, Tristan detailed that $200,000 was in a safe at his family's funeral home in Fort Myers. Wade did not attempt to find someone to help Tristan. He instead turned the note over to the state attorney's office. Now, charges against Tristan are still pending, but Wade told NBC2 in a jailhouse interview that he was not the kind of person that would complete a contract killing. In the same interview, he denied killing Diane and Christine. He said he was not a monster, but that he was also not a saint. He then went on to claim that corruption in the police department is why he was being charged with the deaths of the two women. He also said his confession about killing the two women was forced or coerced. He claimed that he was recruited to become part of a crime syndicate that included human trafficking, drug trafficking, and prostitution, and that the murder charges related to Diane and Christine are just to keep him quiet and locked away. He said he is the loose end that needs X'd out. Now, when the trial finally took place, 4.5 years after the murders, the prosecution laid out in their opening statements why Wade deserved the death penalty. Andreas Gardner, who argued for the state, said Diane and Christine shared 3 things in common when Wade murdered them. Here's the 3 things. They were specifically selected, they were secluded from others during their murders, and they were both strangled. He also reminded jurors that Wade admitted to authorities that he had already killed 2 women and that he would do it again if given the opportunity. Now, testimony during the trial included Stephanie, that was the friend who was at the bar with Christine on the night and the early morning hours of the murder. There was also testimony from Jason, who was also at the bar, but the most damning testimony came from Stephen, that's Wade's father. He told jurors about the confessions and about Wade's past. He said Wade was excited to tell him about killing Diane and Christine. He testified to details of both women's deaths that Wade had bragged about. And not much of a defense was put forward for Wade. He didn't testify, which really isn't that surprising. But even his own attorney said he wasn't going to argue that his client didn't do it. He simply stated his client is whacked out of his mind. Well, it took jurors just over 2 hours to find Wade guilty of all the charges. During the sentencing portion of the trial that happened this week, Christine Melton was remembered by her cousin. She said the two had a relationship that was more like best friends. She said Halloween was Christine's favorite holiday because she loved to dress in character. She also said Christine had a quick wit, and then when you were in Christine's presence, you felt safe and understood. Christine was also the godmother to her cousin's child, and she said that watching her with her child made her understand that Christine was born to be a mother. She then said Wade took that opportunity away from her. Now, she looked straight at Wade at this point and said, "You threw Christine away like garbage." Well, in a sad twist, Christine's mother lived just 1 block away from Christine's home. Following the murder, she fled the area in grief and has since been living in Maryland with one of her children. Her mother has not attended a single day of the trial. And when advocates for Diane were able to speak, they mentioned her as a dedicated mother. Diane's son, Zane, told that when Diane was murdered, he was just a freshman in high school, and that it was just days before Zane was to perform in his first high school band program. He lamented that during all of his subsequent band performances, he never got to see his mother smiling in the crowd. Zane also explained that Diane had just become engaged, and her wedding was set to happen in a few months. He also said he hoped that his mother was proud of him, that he completed high school and received a full ride scholarship to college. He also lamented that during his freshman year, he was involved in a car accident and that he couldn't reach out to his mother during that difficult time. Now, also during the sentencing portion of the trial, 3 physicians testified to Wade's mental health. They evaluated a series of clinical tests, some of them as recent as 2 weeks ago. During the mental competency portions of the testing, Wade basically received A, B, and C grades. He was determined to have an IQ score of 92, which is lower than the average, but not too low to function in society. In those tests, he struggled mostly with math. Now, the physicians said they discovered that Wade was adjusted and active in sports and other activities clear up until he hit puberty. It seems at that point, that's when Wade started declining and his mental health became compromised. During his teen years, he was plagued with mood swings and would often mention that he wanted to, quote, get the alien presence out of him. When Wade was 16, he was committed involuntarily to a mental hospital, but he was only held there for one day. He then was eventually expelled from high school. Most of that was based on drug accusations. His physical history also showed signs of head trauma. He had multiple concussions in his early years while playing baseball and football. And then, when he was 18 years old, he was involved in an auto accident. Wade crashed into a tree and he was not wearing a seatbelt. Then, 3 years later, he was involved in another auto accident. Both accidents are believed to have caused trauma to Wade's brain. Between the time frame of those two accidents, Wade overdosed on narcotics and suffered a seizure before being revived. Now, the three doctors did agree that Wade lacked executive function, and that means he basically can't handle everyday tasks. He also suffers from inhibition, so he doesn't know when to say when, and he also can't control his attention. They concluded that when Wade uses substances, his difficulties are heightened. Well, on Tuesday, following a half day of deliberation, the jurors found that Wade Wilson deserves the death penalty. It wasn't unanimous, though. Now, the punishment is now going to be handed over to Judge Nicholas Thompson, and he'll take the jury's recommendation into his consideration, and then he will decide if Wade will be added to death row in Florida. If he does receive the death penalty, he joins 8 other men convicted of capital murder. The judge will sentence Wade on July 23rd. And now to this story out of Phoenix that highlights the degradation of humanity. 69-year-old Geronimo Garcia Guerra left his home on Monday morning in a car he borrowed from his daughter, Monica. He was on a honeydew errand. His wife's car had stopped working just 2 miles from his daughter's home, and Geronimo was headed to the breakdown point to fix his wife's car. When Geronimo arrived, he jacked the car up and wiggled his way underneath to assess the problem and begin the repair. At some point on that fateful morning, the car slipped from the jack and trapped Geronimo underneath. He laid there, potentially for a couple of hours, fighting for his life. But no one came to his aid. Instead, thieves rummaged through his pockets, ransacked the broken down vehicle, stole his belongings, and then stole his daughter Monica's car. When police were finally summoned 3.5 hours after he left his daughter's home, Geronimo was pronounced dead at the scene. His daughter said the following about the crime and, quite frankly, the lack of humanity. "It's so hard because I would never do that to somebody. I could care less about my car, but at least they could have done is called for help. That's somebody's dad, somebody's husband, a grandparent, somebody's best friend. And I don't have that person anymore because somebody couldn't stop to check on him." Well, Monica's car was found the next day abandoned, not too far from the scene of her dad's death. Police have yet to make arrests in the death, but they are reviewing camera footage to determine potential suspects. And finally today, a quirky story. An entire chapter of the Hells Angels have been arrested as part of a kidnapping, robbery, and assault probe. I said that right, an entire chapter. The motorcycle club out of Bakersfield, Florida, which includes only 7 members, so that does seem less drastic, but the 7-member outlaw gang were arrested last week. Authorities seized 25 firearms, ammunition, multiple high-capacity magazines, and gang-affiliated paraphernalia. All the suspects were charged with first-degree robbery, assault with a firearm, false imprisonment, and elder abuse. The U.S. Justice Department designates Hells Angels, founded in the years after World War II in Fontana, California. Well, they call them an outlaw motorcycle gang and a criminal enterprise. Its colorful history includes members' attacks on concertgoers at Altamont, California in 1969. Also, its love-hate relationship with the late author Hunter S. Thompson. And then also its deadly clash with members of the rival Mongols in Laughlin, Nevada. That all happened in 2002. Now, federal authorities allege the gang has long been involved in trafficking drugs and firearms. I'll watch that story, see if any more comes out. Those are a litany of charges, so I'm sure there is lots of information we do not know. And just to let you know, we're on verdict watch for the Karen Reed trial. Remember, that's the trial out of Boston, the murder of John O'Keefe. Potentially, she backed over him with the car. There's also a belief that there was a huge police presence that manifested or created this concept that she did back over him, but he died some other way. That jury is currently deliberating in Karen Reed's trial. I will let you know as soon as I know. Just a heads up, Peyton is covering this. She has been establishing an episode to give to you guys. It will come out immediately on TikTok, Instagram, everything when the verdict happens. So watch for it there. And then I'll also cover it on Rise and Crime. You can get it in both places. And you guys, that's your Thursday episode of Rise and Crime. As always, please, if you're loving the content, do a couple of things for me. You can share it with a friend. Also, make sure that you show some love by 5-star reviews. Those are free. And of course, positive comments on all of the various platforms are welcome. And you can like and follow us on all those social media and YouTube accounts that we have here at Oh No Media. And you can join me again on Monday for more morning crime news. I'm Mama Jules, and keep safe out there.